too much, you know.
Mm.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Fake Accents Unite. I am joined, as always, by my long-suffering co-host, the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening and welcome to Sicko and Cripple United. Yes.
Except both of those people are me, you know.
well, given my record, what can I say?
Welcome to some of the regulars in chat. Nice to see Scowen and Burnsy in there. Echo. That's quite concerning. I
can't hear an echo coming from you, so I don't know.
I'm not hearing an echo from myself. I'm not hearing an echo from you. I have headphones on, so there should be no audio escaping. Or is it someone someone had two browsers on. Okay. Marvellous. Thank you ever so much. Nice to see, as I say, some of the other people in the chat. We come to you today, it being a Tuesday, as a courtesy to the academic agent who was unable to run Unpopular Opinions today, so we swapped with him. I hope it's not too inconvenient for anyone here, and it's still an enjoyable show. Obviously, we haven't been around for a little while, so as British intonated slightly, I have been ill for the past 2 weeks. It's been horrific. I had this super cold that's been going around, you see. Do you know anyone who's been having the super cold, Britisher?
I've not heard of anyone having the super cold. No.
Well,
no. So this is. Are we talking sort of proper flu here?
Yeah. Well, a very nasty chest infection. So fluids everywhere for about a week, and then a persistent cough that still hasn't quite left me. Although testing assures me that it is not the disease of the day, as it were. But it is still a nasty chest infection and something I was getting over.
Was it one of those infections where eventually you just ran out of tissues and just settled for toilet paper?
Well, I mean, the trouble is, Patricia, so many people got it, at least in my area, that the toilet paper stocks in the shops nearby were out of stock.
I see.
Perpetually sort of...
This wasn't panic buying due to supply chain problems. This was simply so many people needing nose blows that they just basically bought every roll of toilet paper or kitchen paper just up completely.
Essentially. And it's very frustrating for a working man as myself, who didn't have the time in the day to go and get it, and you get in the evening and everything's bought out again. But... I get through these things. It was just very uncomfortable for a while, and very much happy.
You do realise these things only get worse the older you get.
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry for being the misery guts and kind of having to tell you this, that these are the things you have to look forward to. That your worst colds that you've had whilst you're still a strapping young man, and which you sort of thought, my God, that was a bit rough, will only get worse with every decade you add on.
Well, I'm assuming, Britisher, as the font of all knowledge that you are, that this is coming from a place of experience. But
this definitely comes from a place of advanced decrepitude.
Well, I feel sorry for, who is it? One of my friends who had it.
I wonder how many people on their bingo card had the word decrepitude being mentioned this evening.
Well, you got Britisher mentions the Romans, Britisher mentions his state of mind, Britisher mentions his state of health, Britisher mentions that YouTube is angry with him.
Well, yes, but decrepitude as the specific word. I think that's we've set a high marker here, haven't we?
I don't think so. But I simple, Britisher. If I get that sick ever again, regardless of what age I am, I shall simply commit suicide. It's very, very...
I see.
Like, I'm not going to allow this to get the better of me. I know I shall take the...
Well, somehow, once again, I think this is a young man talking. Because Well, no. This is one of these things that appears to have been observed with shipwrecks of all kinds. That apparently it's the young who give up sooner. So if you basically, you're in a storm and you've been flung overboard or some such thing, it appears to be the older people who keep fighting and swimming on the longest, and it's the young who give up.
Well, there are two theories then for this. One is that the older people have more to fight for, wives and children and so on to get back to.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is that they've just been filled with so much spite for the young that they drown the young.
They want to see them die.
They want to see them die.
I'll hang on that little bit longer because I want to see that young little not for brains there drowned.
I am not going out before Hughes, that 22-year-old prick,
Well, it could also just be, this is my theory here, that somehow the older have had more sort of close encounters with despair, and therefore perhaps are less overwhelmed by it.
Well, yes, because all the ones who were overwhelmed by it already died.
Well, true, yes, but that it could just be that those same people were basically hardened by it, as opposed to had they in previous years been in the same situation, they would have been the ones who would have given up.
There is another factor.
So it's not so much the resilient who have come to be the older ones, but it's because they're older that they've become more resilient.
Well, there's also another factor here, which is that if you're older, you're more likely to be in a more senior position, and whether or not that may impact where you happen to be on ship in a crash.
Well, could be. So what you're saying is if you're the older one, you're Captain Mannering, swimming alongside them, going, "Stiff upper lip, lads, keep swimming."
If you happen to be in the office and not the guy who has to hold...
Sergeant Wilson, will you please set an example?
I need to go back and watch more of that. So if you happen to be on the bridge as opposed to down in engineering, and if you're in engineering you happen to be in the office rather than in the area that's flooded and filled with electrical equipment, then perhaps you have a higher chance of survival. Who knows? But no, I thought that was quite an interesting anecdote of yours there, Britisher. You've still got it, even in your advanced decrepitude.
Yep. Even with advanced decrepitude, I've still got it. Yes.
Yes, and I am thankfully not dying yet.
You're just decrepit, but not in the advanced state of decrepitude yet.
Well, I haven't earned the ability to moan about it yet, like you have. You see,
there is that. Yes. So you were mentioning before we came on air. You were mentioning your boxing.
Yes, because now that I'm better and I was craving the exercise, I've gone back to my gym to do some boxing this evening, and I am very much feeling the fact that I have been away for 2.5 weeks. It's just...
So what you are saying is you are feeling more like Deontay Wilder than you are like Tyson Fury right now.
Let's pretend that I know who Diane Wilder is, but I assume it's a boxer.
You have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about here.
I know who Tyson Fury is, but that's about it, really.
Yes, but you don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
Well, this Saturday, they just happened to have been a heavyweight boxing championship fight. So this was for the title.
I see.
This was the third time that these chaps have met. So you may remember there was that famous moment when Tyson Fury got absolutely clobbered and looked knocked out on the canvas.
Yes.
But then got back up again, like a machine.
Yeah.
That was Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder has an absolutely furious punch. And if he catches his opponent, he really can deck even the most stalwart of the heavyweights. Except, of course, Tyson Fury got back up. And then in the second fight, the first one was a draw. So it was a draw despite Tyson Fury being clobbered quite that heavily. The second one, Tyson Fury won decisively. And this one now, this Saturday, was the third one.
I see.
And there was 5 times in total that one of the fighters was down. So Deontay Wilder went down 3 times and Tyson Fury went down twice. So particularly the final rounds was something quite remarkable. So yes, I'm surprised for someone with an interest in boxing that he wouldn't have heard, at least, by others who were there, who were around you in the boxing gym, of this having taken place.
I see. Well,
it was rather remarkable. That's when the guy who wins has a black eye, you get the feeling that yes, it's been a bit of a rough and tumble.
Well, you see, I go to the box. Well, first and foremost was to lose the COVID gut that I acquired over the course of the last year, which I've been fairly successful at. I lost sort of 12.5 kilos, which is about 2 stone, and then this illness has hit, and I've put another kilo back on, so I'm going to have to work that off again. But my interest is past. Like, I didn't join the gym because I was interested in boxing. I joined the boxing because it was interesting.
Well, there is one thing that is worth pointing out here. If only to boost your confidence.
Go on.
And that is, of the 2 men who fought, it was Deontay Wilder who had the 6-pack, who looked the absolute athlete. And it was Tyson Fury who had a bit of a beer gut. And it was Tyson Fury who won.
So what you're saying is if I retain the beer gut, I gain extra power?
No doubt he would more than likely not be too flattered by saying it was a beer gut.
No.
How shall we say? It's not the full sort of football hooligan super belly, if you know what I mean. It's more... He doesn't have the sort of athlete's physique, but nonetheless he was the one who won.
I can see,
and I would say deservedly so. Yes,
I can see. The thought has gone completely out of my head. But someone I can see in chat.
Oh, I see. You definitely have been boxing. You can't hold thoughts in your head anymore.
Oh yeah, that's the concussion.
How hard did they punch you?
Don't know, but you should see the other guy.
Of course.
Bless him. The chap who I box with the most at the moment is very, very tired. He's got a very heavily pregnant fiance, and I am. So we try to give each other a good workout, but he stopped me after a sparring match today and just went, just a little softer, please. It's just. I said okay, that's fine. But he's rambunctious, shall we say? If you give him any leeway, he barrages you with a series of blows, and I just couldn't let that happen today. I was just too knackered, and first day back after the illness, and so I just shoving my shoulder in there and just hook to the head, as much as I can. He was not very happy, bless him. But yeah, I can see in chat Burnsy is saying, is NSO training for a YouTuber boxing match? I am not, although I did challenge the academic agent, given that he's doing. Well, he calls it Blaze classes, and so I was just like, oh, for goodness sake, what on earth is a Blaze class? Essentially, he's doing boxercise, as I understand it. So no sparring or anything like that, and I challenged him, and he said, "Oh, no, I'm a lover, not a fighter." Would you describe the academic agent as a lover, British?
I don't know. It's not necessarily the first word that would spring to mind. Whatever you do, don't ask me what the first word would be.
It's hard to imagine him loving or fighting, and I don't know if I want to. If I'm honest, he's a friend of the working man, and we shall leave it at that. People are asking what my height is. 6'1". Yes, that's accurate. But yes. NSO versus Britisher YouTube boxing. I don't think it's a particularly fair fight to put me up against the geriatric.
Yes, I would agree. Yes, yeah. I think my crutches might get in the way.
This is or the wheelchair. Give him the wheelchair. Give him the wheelchair. Oh no, that's WWE, isn't it?
I would be the one in the obesicle.
The obesicle.
Yeah, there was a sort of stand-up routine, wasn't it? One of those mobility scooters where.
Oh no!
Where it was one of those sort of sharper stand-up routines when one of them sort of said, "Oh well, yes, I saw this chap coming down the road in one of those. What do you call them? Mobility scooters, don't you? I just refer to them as obesicles."
Oh, very good, very good. Very American-centric as well. There's a South Park episode, I believe, where Cartman deliberately makes himself fatter so that the government will send him a faticle, free of charge. It's just very ridiculous. I think they call them rascals over there, which, given that if you use the word rascal, you picture some youth scampering about.
Yeah, you sort of think of Dennis the Menace or something like that, don't you?
Yes, I wouldn't describe something which is designed to take a 400-pound behemoth of a benefit scrounger as
an American.
An American.
Just an American. Yes, that's sufficient.
Someone who's...
We all know what you mean.
Somebody whose veins do not pump blood, but instead pump liquid cheese.
I mean, that's why they're... that's why their fighter jets are so much bigger than ours.
Yes, because their air force is chock full of the obese. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, "I apologise for bringing plague to the event. Seems like everyone caught it." So it was you, was it, Anakin Cringewalker? It was you in the end. I blame you. Yes, this is the...
I think Anakin Cringewalker might be the person who is related to... What was it? Is it the CEO of Pepsi? Or is it the former CEO of Pepsi?
Mr. PepsiCo?
No, it's actually a lady.
Mrs. PepsiCo.
Mrs. PepsiCo. And she was just recently in the news because she sort of said, "Oh, I never asked for a raise." Personally, I think that's cringeworthy. So here is the CEO or former CEO basically telling the worker bees, "Don't ask for a raise, that's cringeworthy."
I never asked for a raise, that was cringeworthy. I just took it. That was based.
So so I'm just wondering whether Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker is in some way related to Mrs. PepsiCo.
I think he wishes he might be. That's quite a large settlement if he goes that way. But no, sadly not. He says, for footage of the Britishers' boxing skills, search YouTube fighting trousers. Fighting trousers?
Yes, there is there is one of these, British rappers, but in this case, very British rapper. So we're talking, we're talking a chap who once in a while sort of turns up in a pith helmet. And the fighting trousers, I do believe I know which video he means. It's very much me, yes.
Very much a man in a pith helmet, but no shirt. I mean, let me get this up for the chat to see, as it were. News viewer, work for me here. Fighting trousers. This is, if it'll pop itself to work. There we go. I need to zoom in, really. There we go. Here he is. Somewhat unflattering image of the British. Although I do like that there's a series of sort of well-dressed gents to his left, egging him on in the ring. I may have to check this out later to see what you've been up to in your spare time. I can't leave you alone for a minute, can I? You go out, you start.
If you just don't turn up, I have to do something else to keep myself entertained.
You start a rap career. Then there's the whole, like, I see you...
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm definitely the one for the rap career.
I saw you on YouTube, not YouTube, on Twitter the other day, throwing shade at Linkin Park's raps. Clearly calling out another rapper, making a diss track on it.
I said it was, there might be an argument for taking a time machine and going back to the early 80s to terminate all early rappers in order to avoid things like these.
Wasn't it, the song was In the End, for anyone who's interested. And I think it was...
Oh, you say song.
It was still music, Britisher, even if it wasn't to your taste.
Debatable.
It's
highly debatable.
Just because it's not B.B. King.
Well, I mean, if you're the one who brings up the comparison, so you're taking one of the absolute highlights of the 20th century and posing it next to, yes, people, shredding away on their guitars and then rapping to it. I'm sorry, but just no.
I want you to look in chat right now at Burnsy3210's message and say what he's written.
I'm not even in YouTube, so hang on.
Dude, I will. I can post it for you in the stream chat here.
Hang on, what am I looking at here? Burnsy3218, MC Britisher coming right at you via your gramophone. Yeah, why not? I can see myself doing that on shellac.
That's a dated reference. Good grief.
I wonder how many people. I wonder if Google is just registering that the word shellac is trending
for the first time in over 20 years.
For some reason, a few dozen people want to know what the word shellac means all at the same time.
Oh dear. Do you want to explain it to them, Britisher? Go on.
No, I shall just leave it as the mystery.
Just leave it there, as opposed to all the people furiously Googling now.
You see, that was one of the pieces of magic in the Highlander. It was never explained to you why they're immortal. In fact, the Highlander at one point asks the Ramirez character. Christopher Lambert asks Sean Connery, how come is this? Why is this? And he just shrugs and goes, who knows? Why are there stars in the sky? I have no idea. And, in the second part, they try to answer it. And it wrecked everything. The moment you say, they're actually aliens from outer space. Don't do that.
It's the midichlorians effect. But it's also... what was it like? I like the idea that they did know, right? But Sean Connery forgot his lines at that point. It's like, why are we immortal? I don't know. Could be anything.
Well, wasn't it said that in what was it? Blade Runner. Is it replicants? Is that what they're called?
I think so. Yes.
The guy who basically has him dangling from the building at the end. He holds this beautiful monologue at the end of the great things he had seen, and then dies. That was not in the script.
Oh.
he had come up with that himself.
So
Rutger Hauer, that was the name, wasn't it? Rutger Hauer, that was the name of the actor. And he felt that the scene needed something. So he wrote something for the character to say, and without telling anybody. And then, as they got to that scene, they were playing it, he just broke into this monologue. And by the time he was finished, you could hear a pin drop, because everybody's jaw just dropped and went, oh my God, that's fantastic. And it stayed in the film.
Amazing. Someone's put in chat, do you remember I promised to kill you last? Was that an ad lib as well? I didn't think so. Not that I'm aware of. I lied, yes. So Scowen says 86.453. I assume it's 86,453 seconds late. This is almost...
No, we'll just go with 86.
86.453.
He said it. 86.
This is almost acceptable comparable to the norm. Also, alcohol can disinfect you from the inside. I don't know, I did consider this over the course of my illness. It was like, if I drink vodka, does it kill all of the bacteria in my throat and therefore solve my problem for me? But I had no idea.
I mean, your liver is going to look like a Swiss cheese, but it's going to be otherwise clean. Yes.
Not after one shot of vodka. Not chugging back the entire bottle.
I think the audience will back me up here. The way in which you said this didn't sound like one shot. It sounded very much as if you would decide to sort of, okay, we'll just go on a vodka diet.
It's like bleach could disinfect you from the inside, but I wouldn't want it.
Well, I mean, didn't Donald Trump suggest as much?
Oh, the hydroxychloroquine thing. It was not that.
No. The actual bleach.
No, he didn't. It was a misquote. That particular one. Well,
they afterwards said he was joking, but I don't actually think that was true.
He wasn't joking. He was talking about a particular study involving lasers, which reduced one of the particular compounds in...
He wasn't talking about lasers.
Anyway. We were... I can't remember the exact details right now, but I'm pretty sure it was taken poorly. One shot bucket, people are saying. You could try mouthwash, but don't drink it. Fish tank bleach. I don't know. I just drank a lot of broth, to be honest. A lot of chicken broth.
Oh, what was it? Isn't that Jewish antibiotic?
What, chicken
soup?
Chicken soup. I don't know about Jewish. It's pretty universal as far as I know. But
yes, but I believe it's sort of nicknamed as Jewish antibiotic.
Is it? I've never heard anyone talk about Jewish antibiotics. If I'm honest, where have you picked this up from? Do you have a particularly racist family member who referred to it?
No, it's not. It's not meant in a racist manner. I wouldn't put it past it actually being Jewish comedians who came up with that.
Probably.
They quite like making fun of themselves. Have you noticed that?
How many non-Jewish comedians are there, aside from Dave Chappelle?
Well, yes, but have you noticed how many Jewish comedians actually make jokes about, their wider Jewish family and Jewish society and whatever? So it is a ready staple.
It is a trope, yes. Cause
if you quote them saying that, you're not being anti-Semitic.
Well, yes, exactly, right. It's a group that they can safely make fun of. This is where you get Sacha Baron Cohen in Borat giving his character an intense fear of Jews, which irritated the Kazakhs no end. But of course, for himself, he's not going to come under fire for calling.
I think one of the absolute masters of it was Jackie Mason. No doubt you'll tell me you've never heard of him.
Yeah.
He was... He literally came over here once or twice a year from America via Concorde. So he would come across via Concorde. I mean, I think you know that there was no second class on Concorde.
Yes.
Then stay for a few nights at a 5-star hotel in Mayfair, and just fill the Albert Hall for 4 nights, and then get back on Concorde and fly back to the US. And yes, he could. He was one of those comedians who was capable of destroying an audience. Where you're laughing so hard, you just want him to stop. Just stop for a minute. I need to breathe.
There are a few comedians who've done that for me. I'm just trying to remember. I do remember the first time, especially I find it with I have more respect for it as well if it's a comedian who isn't being too vulgar, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they could make me absolutely lose it over something relatively, without resorting to that, I find it much funnier. And Ross Noble did this for me.
Yes, he is one of those guys. He improvises quite heavily, doesn't he?
He does.
Ross Noble.
But he also did this particular stand-up set at the Apollo where he basically spends a good amount of time talking about meat, essentially, and then he just goes into this massive rant about having meat on your face, and then what it would be like to live with meat on your face, and how you'd have to attach strings to the meat, for instance, to when you're walking around, it makes it pop up so you can see where you're going, or look like a scared rabbit. It's very bizarre, completely off the wall,
surrealist humour. Yes,
but so funny, and
well, he's a bit more structured, but he's more than likely the one who, in his approach, I know he's more surrealist, but nonetheless, in his approach, I think he is about the closest of present-day comedians to Billy Connolly.
Oh, right.
He's got sort of a rambling style, and you realise it's not too well organised. I mean, Billy Connolly, I think, pretty much just, he had a few ideas, and he walked on stage, and then just did his thing.
Sean Locke was a bit like that.
And Ross Noble, I think, is very, he's a little more structured than Billy Connolly, but nonetheless, you've got the feeling this is not something which is sort of polished down to the last word and whatever. He goes out there and just basically, okay, it will be all right, and more than likely just having the butterflies in his stomach and whatever, those kind of things make it work for him. Whereas other comedians, they need everything absolutely down to a T. So you can be sure, sort of Jimmy Carr, he's more than likely got everything absolutely polished before he ever steps out on stage.
Jimmy's, which is why he's always the host on panel shows, because he is fed lines, right? He's prepared all his japes and his jabs beforehand. But and so it's the same with someone like Michael McIntyre, where it's a very curated show where he knows he's telling a story, and therefore he knows every twist and turn of that story. But if you put him in a live setting, he's completely useless. The man is not funny at all. I
mean, I think the most devastating comics are, in a way, those who are very scripted, but have got the ability to go off script. So, if there are any viewers of the older generation out there, have you ever heard of Bob Monkhouse, NSO?
Yes.
So he was very scripted. He was one of these people who kind of looked at it like a science, but at the same time, he had the ability to ad-lib, to go off it. And Ken Dodd, I would say, was also one of those. And I think those two would be sort of seen as absolute masters, that they could do it all scripted and everything worked out exactly. I mean, Ken Dodd, for example, he would have someone sit there and gauge the laugh of the audience. So a scale, say 1 to 10. and with every gag he made, whether it was, what number it got, and not just as a sort of a one-off. It would be in every town. So like that, he would get to gauge which jokes work best in what town. So he could actually vary it from region to region. So when you hear it like that, you realize, yes, some of these guys, particularly the older comedians, they made an absolute science out of it, but they were capable of going off script. I mean, I remember Ken Dodd, I mentioned this on Twitter just the other day. Ken Dodd, you know how they sort of like to talk to people in the front row?
Yes.
And in this case, it was sort of an elderly gentleman. He just kind of looked at him and just went, as an aside to what he was already doing, he said, "Might I congratulate you on your choice of trousers? I would say beige trousers are a very courageous choice for a gentleman of your age." And then just continued with his script. And it just, yeah, I mean...
You don't have his comedic timing, Britisher, but I'm sure...
Precisely, yes. I won't even pretend I have. But just I just thought that the semantic content might be enough to get people to realise what the guy was doing.
Yes. Dara Breen was very, very good. His live shows were typically sort of 20 minutes at the beginning of every show is talking to the audience. And not a lot of it is prepared, but a decent...
Well, I think with most of them... I don't really want them as presenters. Just with Jimmy Carr and Dara O'Brien, I love them when they're stand-ups. And I felt, for example, that Monkhouse was pretty creepy as a host, but as a stand-up, he was one of the best I'd ever seen. So yeah, I would just love if they would just have someone like Angus Deaton, who's just basically, you're just a straight man.
Yeah.
You just do the presenting and let the comedians get on with it. But once you take a comedian out of what he actually is good at, if you know what I mean, and then you give him another role, I think more often than not, no, it doesn't really work.
Who was it that Angus Deaton had a massive spat with, which led to him leaving Have I Got News for You?
Oh, was it really a spat, or was it... because didn't they... Wasn't there a scandal about him using cocaine at parties or something like that?
Yeah, but they made fun of him.
Yes, I mean, they just mercilessly laid into him during the show, and it then became sort of apparent to BBC management that it just wouldn't work. They would just continue on. So he had to go in order to be able to sort of free up the show. And then they started with this guest host thing, which you sort of felt, well, it was funny for about a month, and they just kept on ad infinitum, and they still haven't put this thing out of its misery. I think it should have ended a long time ago.
Yes, we could agree on that, definitely.
I think just about all these panel shows have long since had their day.
Yes, the day of the panel show... It's weird, isn't it? Because there's not really... Comedy is definitely on the decline in the West anyway, as I see it. Not that the American comics were ever up to much scratch, with the odd exception.
Oh, I mean, there are some famous... I mean, have you ever heard Bill Hicks?
Yes.
And you think he is inferior to British comedians? Or was. I mean, he's not around anymore.
Yes. I think that for every Bill Hicks, there would be 3 quality British comedians. And you can trust me because I'm saying this on the internet. And therefore that number is completely rooted in science.
Of course, yes. How could I possibly think otherwise? But I think they definitely have had their, I mean... Joan Rivers is another absolute classic.
Sure, and you get people
Jackie
like
Mason, who I spoke of just before. So they've had absolute fantastic comedians over there.
You've got people like Reginald D. Hunter and stuff like that who are very good. I'm just saying that it's my personal preference, shall we say. I'm trying to remember the name of a comedian who was just absolutely phenomenal at giving one-liners, and he broke from the one-liners to do this little rant about his wife. He said,
is he a Brit? Is he a Brit?
No, but he said
Canadian.
I think so. And
I can pretty much picture him in front of myself. I just can't think of. I think I've even seen him live. But yes, I just can't think of his name right now.
But anyway, this chap goes, there's people talk about love being the most powerful force in the universe, keeps couples together. Love isn't the most powerful thing keeping couples together. Me and my wife, we're not together out of love. It's out of spite.
Stuart Francis.
Possibly. I mean, I have to look it up.
In all fairness, I had to look it up. I couldn't think of his name.
Possibly. I don't think it's him necessarily, but it might be.
The British one is Tim Vine, but the Canadian one. That's why I said he's a Brit. That would have been Tim Vine. He's actually related to the Newsnight presenter.
Oh, really?
Jeremy Vine.
Jeremy Vine, yeah.
He's his brother.
That's funny. But, so he's talking about this spite thing. He's just going, my wife is with me and has been with me for 35 years because she knows as long as she's with me, I'll never be happy. And it's like, I'm with her for the same reason, of course. It's very funny. Like, there's those kind of jokes which just stick with you over time. The first time you heard the punchline and wham, it's stuck in your head. I love all that. I suppose I should probably introduce what the reason for this stream's name is today. The stream is called the Autumnal edition of Fake Accents Unite. Do you feel that autumn is in the air now that we're past I believe the official date of
I thought you were about to address the fact that I'm in the autumn of life.
Now that you're in the twilight years, which how does it feel? I feel like this is.
Do I feel autumnal? I think with the weather as it is at the moment, it's difficult not to feel autumnal.
Apparently, autumn started
during the time in which you were ill. It just pretty much rained incessantly, didn't it? So you missed all that.
It was a good period of time, yes, where it was very wet, and suddenly the air changed, and now instead of it being 25 degrees, it's closer to 10. But at least where I am, certainly. But apparently it's been here. Autumn officially turned on the 22nd of September. I don't know if I'd say it was quite that far back, personally. But I got told by someone recently, a friend of mine, who's Polish, and they said to me, Mark, how do you tell what season it is here? You don't have seasons in Britain. I just felt incredibly offended at this notion. We have four very distinct seasons, of course. But apparently, according to everyone else, just due to the nature of our weather and everything, and that we just don't have this kind of seasonal pattern.
I would say I understand why a Pole would say that.
Did a Pole
obviously, having grown up on the continent, I am familiar with the fact that they do have much more defined seasons than we do.
What, does it just change in one day? Is that...
Well, I mean, put it like this, they have much colder winters than us. And they have hotter summers.
No, they don't.
So
Poland...
you have to overcome this gradient somehow.
Look, Poland is a perpetual tundra, Britisher. You must understand this. Every depiction of Poland in all popular culture and media is of a cold and snowy place in the east of Europe, somewhat Siberian.
I might just remind you that I made a video called Geography for Americans, in which I tried to, in very brief sentences summarize the nature of a particular country. And if I recall correctly, Poland I described as a tank practice range for the armies of Germany and Russia.
Yes, somewhat accurate. There's a meme I'm fond of using, which is that there's 3 cats, and the 2 cats have squashed the third one in between it, and have both got their paws around this third cat. And of course it says on one side Germany, on the other side Russia, and in the middle is this very crushed looking kitty called Poland. It just amuses me a little bit. But no, I consider, I've been to Poland, and I can confirm that all year round the sun is never visible, and it's it's a snowy tundra.
How many days were you in Poland?
I don't know, 3 weeks or so.
I see.
It doesn't matter that I was mainly in one city, in Krakow, but it's just the way Poland is, and it makes my Polish friends very angry when I speak about Poland in this way, and that's why I keep saying it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're only sort of they've only got a coast on a sea that sort of freezes. They
don't have a coast. I mean, ridiculous. Poland is basically landlocked.
Of course.
No one has.
Sorry.
No one has ever taken video of the Polish coastline. Therefore, it doesn't exist. I mean, why would you think it exists? Ridiculous. That's why they all go to Croatia when they want a holiday.
Are we now getting into the philosophical area of, if a wave laps up against the Polish coast, does it make a sound?
Is it really Polish? I mean, really, no. It's just the British Empire still extends at that point.
Well, I don't think the British Empire really ever extended.
We ruled the waves, Britisher. Therefore,
I mean, no doubt we attacked it.
No. All of it doesn't matter if we ever conquered the land. The water was always ours because the Navy owned all of the water on Earth. It doesn't matter if there were silly little dotted lines in places which said that different areas were policed by different nations. It was all ours.
With Napoleon having power over Poland, we no doubt. I believe there was a Baltic squadron, and there was even mortars being fired from specialist boats. So yes, we will have been operating in that area. So it's yet another one of those countries that we can tick off as having attacked it. But yes, I don't think we actually ever included it within our territories.
Was it Al Murray's The Pub Landlord who did a sketch essentially where he had an enormous inflatable globe, and he said, name any country in the world, and Britain has conquered it. Name any country, and people naming a country. Someone mentions Belgium, and he says, "Well, I think if you invent a country, you may as well have beaten it, haven't you?" And very, very, very knowledgeable chap is Al Murray. Given it is a character that he's put on. We were talking about Poland. We were talking about autumn. Yes, the 4 seasons. I think we do have 4 very defined seasons. You just have to be sensitive to them. So, for instance, you can tell instantly when the wind has changed and autumn has arrived, and it's nothing to do with any kind of arbitrary date that anyone mentions down. You can feel it. If you're an Englishman, or in your case, a colonial, who's lived here long enough, you can feel it.
Goodbye.
Careful, Britisher. Don't want to find your collection of Austrian memorabilia that you have lying around. But
I think there are a great many other people who might be in danger of, having collected a few too many iron crosses. I don't think it's me.
Oh, the shade being thrown. Goodness me! He won't come on this show now. He refuses to come on if you're around. So I thought it would be funny, but apparently not. the forces, like you can tell when autumn is here, even before the leaves have started to fall. We know it is autumn now. Then the leaves will fall, and then when the last leaf has fallen, we shall know that it is winter. It shall be cold, and then we shall know the instant that it becomes spring again, because there is something in the air that cannot be quantified. That you simply know it in your like it will be before the first buds have opened, but you will know that it is spring. And every good Englishman,
that being the season in which you struggle to get your mind off the ladies' netball team with whom you frequent.
I mean, you're assuming that I pay them any particular attention once I'm finished with them, Brisha. But they
well, you're going full James Bond here, aren't you? Mind you, I dare say old James Bond. The new James Bond doesn't get any sex whatsoever.
Good grief! Yeah, there was that scene, wasn't there? Like they cut an image out for what's the new one called? No Time to Die, I think, and they cut the image out of him on the motorcycle, effeminately
on the scooter. Yes, he's on the scooter in the back. Yes, and she's driving,
and he's not exactly clinging to her either. I just, perhaps he's just a massive racist.
That must be, yes. He doesn't want to get too close because she's black. Yes.
Given that Ian Fleming wrote it, not entirely off the table.
But as such, yes. I think in the last few films, he's seen very little action in that regard. Because yes, that would be sexist. He would be exploiting these vulnerable young women. Strong, independent super killers of women who don't need James Bond to save them, but who are too vulnerable to be, seduced by him.
It's not feminist enough to sleep with the male chauvinist.
It's just really strange. I mean, that's just James Bond. Of course, Superman has just turned bisexual, hasn't he? Well, his son has, but his son is going to be the new Superman.
Oh, for goodness sake! I mean, all of this nonsense. I mean, there's a reason. I just simply do not consume it anymore. I have no desire whatsoever to go to the cinema. I have almost no desire to watch anything that's on television.
That complete sense to me, except for one thing. You don't even watch the old films.
Well, I find myself going back to, at the moment, like I'm going on a little nostalgia trip, watching all of David Suchet's Poirot.
Okay.
Which is, I'm enjoying that at the moment. Although I had intended to watch the entire catalogue over the course of a week. It would be my evening watching.
Didn't Peter Ustinov play Poirot once or twice?
He did. I think he did. Death on the Nile. Yeah, Death on the Nile. I can't remember if he did the. What's the most famous one on the train?
I don't think he did. Death on, what is it? Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
I don't think that was him.
Let me think. He did. He definitely did Death on the Nile. But I'm trying. What did he do? No, he did do Murder on the Orient Express.
Did he?
At least. Look, I'm. 3 movies. No, he didn't. He did definitely.
Was it the famous Murder on the Orient Express, or was it just
no? He didn't.
Another one that was done later.
He didn't. This is Amazon advertising the new version that nobody watched. No, he did Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, and Appointment with Death. But he also did 13 at Dinner, Dead Man's Folly, and Murder in 3 Acts. So he did do 6. There you go. That's not bad. But it's hardly 77.
But of course, he is most famous for playing Nero.
In?
Quo Vadis. Another film featuring the ancient peoples of Italy. you just gone silent, or
That's.
NSO? Are you still with us?
I am. Can you not hear me? Are you?
I can now. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I was laughing quite uproariously at your Romans reference. Everything all right?
No, everything's fine. No, he played Nero rather phenomenally, and of course he also played the gladiator school owner in Spartacus. The film you haven't seen, albeit that you have at least managed to watch Ben-Hur so far.
Look, I watched this. Was it like 4 hours long, Ben-Hur?
It's an epic. It is the epic of epics. It's the greatest epic ever made. It's one of the greatest films ever made.
So I feel my Roman film appetite is...
No. You still need to watch Spartacus.
I still need to watch
Spartacus. The chat will no doubt agree with me. You need to watch Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
Yes. And of course, you've also got Laurence Olivier's speech. Out there is Rome, boy. Which that on its own is already worth the ticket price. So yes, you have to watch Spartacus. You've seen Ben-Hur, so far you've been a good boy, but you still need to watch Spartacus.
You see, the more you call me a good boy, the less inclined I am.
Well, you see, I know how to motivate you.
You think it motivates me? You are optimistic, old man. Good grief. Yes. Sorry, I switched the stream by accident for a second there. I hope nobody saw that. Marangatu says, please, more Rome brain in a jar.
More Rome brain in a jar. There you go. See, in that case, Marangatu, watch Spartacus.
Watch Spartacus.
Not this horrible series that I've never even watched, because the excerpts of it are just too hideous to even contemplate. But no, Kirk Douglas, Spartacus. Watch it. Fantastic. One of the greatest films ever made.
I have an article here which says 10 best and worst films set in the Roman Empire. Are you curious what this?
I am curious. I've got the feeling Ben-Hur, Spartacus, and Quo Vadis will make an appearance. Then there is the Fall of the Roman Empire, that will be in there. Possibly The Robe.
Here we go.
Barabbas with Anthony Quinn. Go on, surprise me. Tell me what's that. What is it? Antony and Cleopatra. That will be. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. They no doubt they will be in there.
So here are the 10 best. It seems to be that they've ordered them in reverse order, and he selected 10 films here. But the article said 10 best and 10 worst, but it's not giving me that. Julius Caesar, 1953, which was sort of the rendition of Shakespeare's play of the same name,
with Charlton Heston as Mark Antony.
Marlon Brando.
Okay, yeah, both of them played Mark Antony, so yes.
Very good. Then we have Quo Vadis, which says, this is a dreadful film, made watchable only by Peter Ustinov's performance as Nero.
No, I think actually the senator who leaves him his note saying you're absolutely obnoxious and your poetry is unbearable, he also puts in a splendid performance. I think it's unfair. It's Quo Vadis is not a fantastic film. It's nowhere near Spartacus and Ben-Hur's levels. It's more than likely not a good film, but it's very memorable simply for the things that happen in it. And Peter Ustinov is fantastic as the Emperor.
Anyone who says the Hollywood studios have no regard for the Christian faith should be chained in front of a video player for 3 hours with his eyes propped open This film does everything short of giving a list of nearby churches in its closing credits. I'm judging that this person is not particularly religious anyway.
Yes, I mean, put it like this. Nero, of course, had it in for the Christians. So in the film Quo Vadis, one has, people being martyred in the arena and things like that. So obviously it's Christian heavy. But you would more than likely expect it, because, how else do you make a film about Nero?
Well, this person didn't like the fact that it was moderns in fancy dress, basically. That's the vibe I'm getting anyway. He's going. He doesn't get the sense of the Roman Empire in it as much. Number 3. Remember, this is in reverse order, so this may as well be position 8 on the top 10, going up, right? Ben-Hur. This person.
Well, so in that case, this was only the 8th best film ever made. So therefore, you've got even more stuff to look forward to.
The 8th best Romans film ever made, according to this. So, although this author remarks they've never watched it all the way through, but they've seen it many times in overlapping half-hour tastings.
Can I just ask, was this listed in The Guardian?
No, this is some film critics and authors' website.
No, I'm sorry. This won't be made by a film critic, not if he's never watched Ben-Hur in its full length.
I could write an essay on Ben-Hur's historical inaccuracies, the raising of a freed galley slave to the nobility, or his then being permitted to take part in a chariot race, but it is a good drama. Charlton Heston's performance is one of his best. John Le Mesurier acts well in a bit part wildly out of character.
He's in the film for about 10 seconds.
Gore Vidal worked on the script. The chariot race is undoubtedly spectacular, but it's more of a holiday documentary. Okay.
Now, given that you yourself have seen Ben-Hur,
yes,
do you think that's a fair representation of that film?
Not particularly, no.
Just okay. So now we know what to make of this list. But now, please do continue. What's the 7th worst Roman film ever made?
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. Yes.
Cleopatra.
With Elizabeth Taylor. Yes.
Yes, and Richard Burton. Then Spartacus.
I think it ruined something like 2 or 3 film production companies that film did, because it was just so vast. It demanded too much, but it had a wonderful spin-off.
Oh.
Because I think they began in several places. They weren't quite sure where to actually do it. I think in the end they did it outside Rome in Cinecittà. But I think there was an abortive attempt in Britain. And therefore one ended up with a lot of Roman scenery and costumes that were no longer needed. And Carry On Cleo got the spares.
Made use of it, yeah?
Yep.
Amazing. I haven't seen the Carry On films for a very long time.
I still find them terribly enjoyable. I think they're really great fun. There are some that really, they don't hold that much water, but there are, Carry On Cleo and Carry On Up the Khyber, and they're just fantastic films.
Fantastic. The 5th or sixth worst, or whatever it is, Spartacus, 1960.
Ben-Hur and Spartacus are the 2 greatest ones ever made. I'm very keen to find out which is the greatest one here.
If you want an overview of the Third Servile War and the decay of the Republic, this film is almost as bad a place to start as the Kakaturian Ballet. Take for example...
Put it like this. It's it is ahistorical. It's not a true history of the story of Spartacus. as is the Kakaturian ballet, that gave the musical soundtrack to the Aeneid line. By the way, that's where the famous old British series, the Aeneid line, got its song from. But as a film, it is fantastic. It's about liberty. It's about the spirit of man. It's not about a historical representation of who Spartacus was or what the slave war was and how the slave war was put down. This was a film made pretty much in the aftermath of the McCarthy era, and therefore it has a lot to say about liberty and about oppression. And the power of that film is undeniable. I really don't think you can watch that film and not feel anything.
Someone is typing a great deal of Latin in the chat. If you take a look.
Roma, yes. Oh, hang on, it goes on.
Yes, verti est sua eterni. Corda nostra solum tibi. Verti...
Yes, my Latin is nowhere near good enough to follow that.
So you should have taken the classics, Britisher. What were you know?
Yes, I know, but that would have meant going to university, which didn't happen for me.
Yeah, well, we can certainly tell that.
Oh, can we now?
Are you ready to find out? I'm just so looking forward to your reaction to this next spot on the list.
Yes. Somehow I've got the feeling this is going to get more and more ridiculous. Because given that they've just passed the two best ones, which I think just about every film critic, if asked, name the two best films set in that era, they would go for Ben-Hur and Spartacus. Yes.
The middle of the road. The fifth best Roman set film? Gladiator with Russell Crowe.
Oh, for the love of God. No.
Ready?
No.
The fourth best film. The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson.
I've never seen the full film. What I have seen of it, it is achingly beautiful. It is achingly beautifully shot. Mel Gibson is a master of what he does, but it is also so horrendously brutal that you do kind of struggle to get through it. I don't know who did the cinema photography in that film, but whoever did deserves an Oscar. I don't know how well it did at the Oscars, because of course it was, I would say it was more than actually the closest thing to Blacklisted, given the history of its production. I don't know if you know the background of this.
I'm aware that there was the whole thing with Mel Gibson's behaviour, rantings and whatnot.
The anti-Semitism that was kind of sort of alleged. Any behaviour of his that really came to the fore afterwards. So, to a certain extent, one feels it was more of a reaction to what had happened rather than it being the initial cause, if you know what I mean. So, he wanted to do this film, and he was getting into directing and things. I don't know whether at that time how many he'd already directed or not. But suddenly the money men and the production and everything just sort of shriveled away at the thought of making this film. And, it became quite clear why, because he wanted to do the kind of biblical retelling of the story.
Yes, accurate.
And of course, in that regard, it would make it quite clear why Christ was crucified, and it hadn't anything to do with the Romans. That it was the Jews. It was the priests of the temple that wanted him done away with.
Yes, the Sanhedrin.
And that they would effectively be portrayed as the villains of the piece. And the moment that came to the fore, Hollywood being dominated by Jewish financiers, suddenly nobody wanted to touch this thing. And it looked as if it would just simply die. And then, of course, Mel Gibson, who was a film star in his own right in the 80s and had therefore made a lot of money, decided to finance it himself.
Yes, it was the only way it would have worked.
Therefore, they made it, and then, of course, came the twist, because they then showed it to the Pope.
Did they?
So before it was ever shown, they gave the Pope a private viewing, and he simply said, "It is as it was," which was then pretty much interpreted as a command to all Catholics to go and watch this film.
Yeah.
Which then, of course, made this film into an absolute leviathan. You had nuns queuing to get into the cinema.
It made something like $750 million.
And given that now all the money went to Mel Gibson, you can imagine that he is a seriously rich man nowadays.
Just a tad.
But in the aftermath of the whole production thing, there were a great many allegations of anti-Semitism towards him and whatever. And at that time, one hadn't really ever heard him say anything anti-Semitic. And then, of course, came drunken ramblings of his that were anti-Semitic or whatever. But that was actually afterwards. And therefore, you kind of wonder in this whole story, what was there first, the chicken or the egg? So was it the fact that he was attacked for being anti-Semitic when he had never done anything, and it was really just the nature of the film that these people took umbrage with, and then one just attacked him in what clearly was an unfair manner? Was that what effectively coloured his anti-Semitism? Or was he anti-Semitic all along and we just didn't know about it? So, yeah, I think we'll never know, but when it comes to the film, I think particularly the crucifixion scene is just, it's a moving oil painting. And there is a sort of a grace and a depth in the whole thing that is beautiful. But it isn't Spartacus, it isn't Ben-Hur, it doesn't have the sort of range of those stories have. It's more of a one-trick pony. So I think it more than likely deserves to be on the list, but I wouldn't put it near the top.
Fair enough. We then have Sebastian, 1976, which is a telling of the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, but it is a homoerotic version.
Oh, I see.
That gave
the arrows with which he is shot are really truly penetrative. Then are they?
The Latin is grotesque. I don't know whether or not this is like a top list. I mean, they've got several of these films he seems to be lambasting as much as praising. He's going, it's grotesque, there's nothing ancient about its moral universe, it shows very little invention, etc. And yet he's placed it higher than Spartacus or Ben-Hur. We have Caligula, 1979.
Caligula in no way could be classed as better than Ben-Hur or Spartacus. It is just ridiculous. I've seen it, and of course, famously, the whole thing was shot by oh Christ, who was involved again? Because they basically cleared out the actors in the daytime. So basically, they got the acting done in the daytime, and then got them all out of the studio, and then brought the porn actors in.
Oh,
And this was unbeknownst to the actual actors.
I see. So they shot all the dirty stuff.
They shot all the orgies and everything. So if you today buy Caligula on DVD, trust me, you are getting the pared down version. I have only seen the pared down version, but apparently the original version was quite spectacularly scandalous. So you would have Malcolm McDowell, I think that's his name, isn't it? Play Caligula and all the proper actors around him, and then you would get an extensive orgy scene with pornographic actors. And then it would return from there back to the largely British acting talent. And, with all these, sand and sandal films, it always tended to be Brits they brought in because American accents kind of jarred too much.
Just a tad.
I mean,
they didn't exist.
When it comes to American accents, John Wayne can play Genghis Khan. He can't play Julius Caesar.
I still find
Yes.
I still find it jarring whenever I watch Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Because
actually, I think he manages to get away with it.
He gets away with it in my mind because when I watched it for the first time, I was a child, and then it wasn't a problem because that's just what I expect to hear. But if you think about, in the context of the story, it works. In the context of the film, it works. But in the context of any historical accuracy, Kevin Costner...
Of course, that was so funny about Tony Curtis in Spartacus, and he himself made jokes about it, because Tony Curtis had quite a broad New Jersey accent, and they tried sending him to elocution lessons and everything, and they just couldn't get him to stop. So, yes, everyone sounds, everyone has got a reasonable accent. Kirk Douglas, yes, he's an American, but again, he gets away with it. But yes, Tony Curtis, it's quite difficult. I think they more than likely clipped some of his dialogue in order to make it more bearable.
Speaking of terrible sort of accent clipping, dubbing, whatever, have you ever seen Hercules in New York?
Oh, Schwarzenegger. No, I've never actually seen it. Didn't they dub him?
It's a very charming film, to be honest, but it is absolutely a product of its time, and certainly no masterpiece. But the scene which immediately comes to mind is when he goes to I think he ends up in an athletics area and picks up a shot put, and as he is going to lift the shot put, he's just bouncing his pecs, the way that muscle men can.
As you do.
Which is just very, very funny. But yeah, so because he hadn't gone through all of the a lot of the accent removal that he did over time. He has a very thick accent, and they dubbed it with this awful American voiceover. And I've watched clips from that one, but I've watched the version where it's him speaking in his native accent, and I find that it's much less jarring. But then, of course, we've got the history of all of Schwarzenegger's other
What is so funny about Schwarzenegger is that I may have told this story before. Forgive me if I have. That in German, in the German-speaking world, they dub films into German.
Yes. And
they get actors to do the dubbing, and therefore, Tom Cruise will always have the same German actor dub him. So like that, the voice remains constant throughout all the films.
That's very German, yes.
And, it makes sense if you think of it. Like that, the actor always has the same voice in all his films. And Schwarzenegger offered to do the dubbing of his
own voice,
his parts in his own voice for free. Basically, like that, he would speak it in German, and they declined.
What? Why?
Well, you see, Schwarzenegger, he is rather from the countryside in Austria.
Oh, I see. He's not cultured
So
enough.
so he comes across in German as a country bumpkin. So, think of sort of the West Country. Cornwall and Devon with a rolling R's.
I mean,
And think about the Terminator talking in that accent.
come with me if you want to live. It's just...
So yes, it doesn't really work, and therefore they said, "Oh no, thank you." But yes, he offered to do it for free and was turned down because, I'm sorry, but you sound like a yokel. We can't possibly use you.
That's good, you do.
So yes, I wonder how well he took that.
He never offered again.
No, I don't think he ever offered again.
Would you like to know the final film on this list? The masterpiece.
So hang on, have we already got to number 2?
We did Caligula, yes. That was number 2.
Caligula was number 2. Okay, yes, which is farcical.
And number 1 is described as a masterpiece, an unapproachably perfect masterpiece, the continual inspiration for all of my historical fiction. Satyricon, 1969, with Federico Fellini, Martin Potter, Hiram Keller, and Max Bourne.
Just the fact that you mentioned Fellini doesn't sound good. Fellini was an art house filmmaker.
Let me see. It's the film is based on a surviving fragment of a novel said to have been written by Petronius, a friend of Nero. The novel is very fragmentary, and any reader has at best a limited idea of its narrative structure. Because what we have is too short for a film, Fellini adds material, either from ancient novels or his own imagination, which is even more opaque and discontinuous. We jump from an earthquake to an art gallery to the feast of Trimalchio to a slave ship to a revolution without warning or explanation. I'm getting the sense that this person, saw some.
If you're a pretentious twit, Fellini is a way in which you will try and see, but by choosing something by Fellini, you will try and appear sophisticated. Fellini is very much a sort of art house film director.
I seem to recall.
He made some famous films, but again, as I say, they're seen more as art than anything else. So La Strada, for example, was a famous film of his. He famously also always had a white horse walk past in every one of his films, completely out of context.
Okay.
So it can even be indoors, and there's a white horse that walks through the room, and then you just go on with the film again. But yes, I think that says everything you need to know about this guy. While you were talking about him, actually, I thought of another film that might actually be worth being in the best 10 Roman films.
Go on.
Something funny happened on the way to the Forum.
Quite a mouthy title. Is it about something happening on the way to the Forum?
Well, it's what's he called? The actor, the one who was in Some Mothers Do Have 'Em. It is his young self. He has the main role in that film, but it even has Buster Keaton in as, I think, the neighbour who is still looking for his long lost child or whatever. It's got quite a good cast, and what it is they've made it was a musical. I think it might have been a Sondheim musical. I'm not sure, but they based it on sort of old stories of, I think, Plautus. Because we still have some sort of old theatre plays and whatever, and so we have an idea of the Roman sense of humour.
We're being told it's Michael Crawford you're thinking of, by the way.
Michael Crawford, there you go. Yes, that's the one. So when you were sort of saying that Satyricon, it goes back to some, fragment of an ancient play or whatever. When it comes to something funny happened on the way to the forum, that is also based on sort of old theatre plays. But in that case, it's not a sort of complete artistic mess that the Fellini film sounds like. Instead, it's funny and it's bawdy. It's got a few songs. The slave is very funny. It's the same one. Have you ever seen the film The Producers, but the original one?
No, I haven't, I'm afraid.
For anybody in the audience, not the Gene Wilder character, but the actual producer with whom he gangs up, because he at beginning, I think, is the auditor, isn't he? That producer, he is actually the slave. He's the naughty slave, the wily slave who always manages to wangle his way around his master and whatever. He is the slave in that film, and yes, it's worth seeing. It's funny, it's unusual, but it's not just pretentious nonsense like Satyricon sounds like.
It does sound quite pretentious, yes. Chat saying Michael Crawford, Britisher will know him as Condorman.
Condorman, yes.
Do you remember Condorman? Condorman is one of my...
I remember Condorman. In my childhood, I once did see Condorman, yes.
I have seen Condorman more times than I have fingers. I adore...
Oh, shame. Shame. You've seen Condorman many times, and if you would have just sacrificed once or say 2 times, you could have watched a Spartacus instead.
I'm amazed, by the way. Vix has remembered that I love Condorman in the chat and mentioned it before I did.
Yes, Condorman, if I remember, the villains caught up with him by realizing that they only needed to read the comic to realize what he was going to do next.
No. So they I know this film so well. It's just not. It's almost not funny. Because the chap who Michael Crawford plays, Woody, is the comic artist and writer, and he creates this comic around the love interest Natalia called Laser Lady, and he sells a series of these comic books to some of the kids, and they realise the bad guy realises that the likeness of Laser Lady is so similar to Natalia that it can only be this guy who is actually the spy, the Condorman, and so that's how they hunt him down. Yes,
you have to forgive me. It was 40 years ago I saw this film. So by realizing that the bad guy realizes something in the comics in order to be able to catch up with him, I still think I'm doing rather well.
I mean, it's let me.
But it is a depressing thought, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen, that here we have got the possibility of talking about Ben-Hur and Spartacus, and instead we are talking about Condorman.
Look. He has this he convinces the CIA to give him everything that he wants. So he's in the middle of it. He rescues Natalia, who wants to defect. In the middle, listen, if you like the idea of this and you haven't seen this film, anyone in the chat, you need to find this film, right? So he has a walking stick that doubles as an assault rifle. That goes.
Well, who hasn't?
Which he does. As he's dressed in this, he then goes into like this gypsy caravan thing to drive away. They are being chased by the KGB's elite force. Who are called what were they called? I don't know. The chap who leads them is Morovich, and he's got a glass eye. Okay, and they're going away, and they're just stuck in this terrible little gypsy caravan. He pushes a button on the dashboard, and it turns into a sports car that is very reminiscent of a Lamborghini Gallardo with a massive Condorman sort of.
Listening to you, I think the makers of the Batman movies
logo on the front
owe Condorman some royalties.
Look, I would much rather watch Condorman than the Batman films, if I'm perfectly honest.
I think I actually agree with you there.
I love everything about that film. It is cheesy, it is hammy, it is like that he flies around
and you very much connect it with your childhood, don't you?
He very much flaps around in enormous paper wings, pretending that they would ever hold him up and allow him to fly, and with very visible wires. It is just glorious, but it's got this soundtrack as well, which is just. I can hear it in my head right now, going and it's just this kind of like America versus Russia spy caper with nonsense and heroes and everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've found the equivalent of what are the Romans to me with Not So Obvious.
It's not. But it's
Condorman.
It is an absolute gem of a film, and it's something that I certainly hope to, show my kids one day. And it's just truly glorious, and it's in that kind of era of film as well, where the HD hadn't really kind of taken off. So like everyone had this thing on VHS.
Imagine how depressed you may be one day when you show this to your kids. And they just look at it and shrug and go,
nonsense. I shall raise them.
And then ask you to put the DVD on of their favorite Superman film.
No.
The one where he gets divorced from his husband.
It's simple. I shall raise them in a cabin in the woods, and they shall never be exposed to such debauchery again. Yes, sorry.
I wonder what film they're going to think is superior, Condorman or Spartacus.
They shall never see Spartacus, of course, because I shall still not have watched it by the time I've procreated. Thank you very much.
Which film is better?
What?
Condorman or Ben-Hur?
Condorman or Ben-Hur? Well, you can't compare these. They're too different. You can't compare them.
I think we take that as a Ben-Hur, ladies and gentlemen. I think we can take that as a Ben-Hur.
I'm going to read some super chats now, Britisher, and you're going to listen. Marangantu, who's been very generous this stream, says, the Barbaran series on NF might tickle your Germanic and Roman sympathies. I'll also have you know that I used a brain in a jar character for my RPG. There you go, Britisher, you've got a fan.
What was this? The Barbaran series?
Yes, on NF, which I presume is a channel.
Netflix.
Oh, Netflix. Okay, yes.
I've not got a Netflix. That's the problem. I've got Amazon Prime, but I've not got Netflix.
Barbaran. Let's see, a German historical war drama television series. Made by Netflix, takes place during the Roman occupation of Magna Germania in AD 9. So there you go.
Now something tells me that what was it? What is it when the 3 or 4 legions? I think it was 4 legions, wasn't it? Were destroyed. What was his name again? Redemi Legionis was what Augustus said. Varus, wasn't it? Varus redemi legionis. Give me back my legions. Is what Augustus is supposed to have cried whilst staggering through the corridors at night because he couldn't sleep when he heard that his legions had been annihilated by those hideous Germans up in the forests.
And then, of course,
something tells me Barbaran will more than likely, if it's set in that part of the world in that era, it will more than likely feature that the Teutoburger forest debacle for the Romans.
And then he was asked, I will give you anything except your legions. Anything that you ask, what do you want? And he said, give me a flight of Spitfires.
Yes, I can see how you're confusing Augustus, the first Roman emperor, with Adolf Galland, the German Second World War Messerschmitt ace.
Yes, I'm not confusing.
Who of course is one of my favourite ever pilots, because he was someone who was so brash he was the only pilot known to have a ashtray installed in his cockpit so that he could continue smoking his cigars whilst flying.
Well, of course, you would admire him, him being your fellow countryman.
How dare you? But no, I just think that is a level of swagger that you have to admire.
Yes. Although it does remind me of, is it the Blackadder episode where the Red Baron meets Blackadder and co. and what's his name? Flashheart just shoots him and goes because he's being too flashy.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there are some photographs, I think, of an old gallant with Douglas Bader. So, once the war was over, they seemed to get on sufficiently to sit down and talk aeroplanes.
I can't remember who it was a German pilot got shot down, basically. And then a British pilot also got shot down. And the British pilot went to the nearest pub, basically, and found another pilot there and struck up a conversation and didn't realise he was German. And they started having a game of chess, I believe, and they finished and he said, where you come from, which unit? And he goes, your guys just shot me down, basically. And, of course, this British pilot pulled a gun on him and said, I'm placing you under arrest. And he said, I'll go with you quite willingly. I studied at Oxford. Just one of these sort of mental, I suppose, interactions that pilots had in the Second World War, because it's just, it wasn't massively long ago that they'd been not
They
allies,
were just basically trying to murder each other
Yeah.
quarter of an hour earlier, and then they're happily sitting in the pub playing chess.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's surreal. It's very surreal. And then, of course, the history of the thing where it's like, the Germans did at one point come over and were welcome, in some ways.
Well, I think it has got something to do with sort of, the whole gentlemanly spirit that, in that regard, already in the First World War, they were kind of regarded as the knights of the sky, and there were one or two moments where, a pilot wouldn't shoot another pilot down because either his machine guns jammed or he was out of ammunition or something like that. So I won't shoot someone down who can't defend himself, that kind of thing.
Well, it was certainly the case for pilots descending via parachute. You did not shoot the parachute, even if you were able.
Yeah, and in the First World War, they didn't give them parachutes.
No. Well, the
technology was available. But the leadership on both sides decided, in that case, they won't fight. They will just bail out with their parachutes. No, we're not giving them parachutes. Which, of course, was the dumbest thing ever, because, in the Second World War, one at least had worked out that the pilot was the more valuable thing of the two things, not the plane.
Yes.
You can build a new plane quite quickly, but you need a lot of time to train the pilot.
Well, here's an even weirder interaction from slightly more modern times. But he used to train pilots in ejection. And what they would have them do is they would they would eject essentially on the ground without a parachute on. So what they had to do was unstrap everything and then jump out the plane. And just for the sake of ease, when you were done, you undid your parachute clip, and then left it for the next person to get in to do the drill. And so when it came to people bailing out in real life, they kept dying, and they trying to work out why. And it was because, they'd practiced taking the parachute off. So when it came to do the drill, it's all muscle memory. What had they done? They'd all ejected the canopy, taken their parachute off, and then jumped out the plane. Because they weren't thinking.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think it was the Dornier 335, I'm not sure. I think that was the plane that I heard you know, I think if you basically try to open the canopy while it's in flight, it would be pulled back with such enormous force it would rip your arms off. And this came to light, I think, when the Germans started to find some pilots of theirs who I think had still remained in the plane but didn't have any arms.
Oh dear. That doesn't.
So they kind of worked out what had happened. But, you know, it's one of these things I think should slide back or whatever. And, of course, you open the two latches, and then because the thing was going at such speed, it ripped the thing back with such speed, and you were still hanging on to it.
Yeah, I think
the whole thing went off, took your arms with you, and, they pretty much found pilots with no arms.
Good grief. That's why they have explosive bolts now.
I think it was Eric Winkle Brown that told that story. That basically it was one of those planes that he had to test fly. And you know, it's always heartening to know that, you know, some of the pilots that have flown this thing ended up with no arms. And then they ask you to get in it, please, and you know, tell us how you think the bird flies.
I think
sort of think, well, that's the moment you would like to ask them to. Couldn't you just ask someone else to do it? I'm feeling a little sickly today.
I think I met a relative of Eric Winkle Brown. Anyway, Mr. Will Guitar says, have you guys enjoyed the recent James Bond movie? I haven't seen it.
I can't say I've seen it.
But I also have no interest in seeing it. If it comes on at Christmas next year, maybe, you know.
Yes, I think I'm sort of in the same. I think I'm in the same territory as you are here. The one thing that I find most off-putting with it is the length.
How long is it?
It's 2 3/4 hours. Now I know you will say, "Oh well, yes, but you liked Ben-Hur." Yes, but it's Ben-Hur. You know, James Bond. I mean. That's a film that, you know, a James Bond story, that's 1.5 hours. How on earth? And I've read a critique of the film where they said, well, nothing much more happens than usually happens in a James Bond film. It just happens so much slower. So, no, I'm not really tempted.
No.
Yes, I think the main thing with me is just the length. You just look at it and just go, How can you possibly tell a James Bond story over such a long space of time? So, yeah. You know, apparently there are not... You would think if it's so long that there would have to be plot twists and all sorts of things going on in order to sustain it. But apparently that is not the case.
Oh dear.
So therefore, yes, it's more of a no thank you from me.
Is it going to be as disappointing as Quantum of Solace? That's the question. We'll have to see, I suppose.
Well, I think the critiques as such have been better than they were for Quantum of Solace. So people are saying it's a better film than that.
Well, I suppose that's something.
I just look to the length of it and just go, I'm sorry, but you couldn't have done it under 2 hours?
I don't know anyone, but then I don't know anyone who really watches ads anymore. So I don't know anyone who, you know... Long gone are the days where I would have a sense that there was some kind of cultural impetus for the ad for a film that everyone wanted to see. And I don't see that for anything at the moment. I mean, I don't even get that for Star Wars, but apparently that makes $1 billion, you know. So I have no idea. Apparently the kind of hyper, shall we say, like cultural commentary has been a bit overhyped, right? So, like, even the Bond on the bike scene, etc., which was, you know, plastered everywhere and which has been critiqued to death, but also, you know, lauded by certain outlets, is just, you know, like another scene. It's not made a big deal out of. It's a passable Bond film, but I don't think passable means memorable, and I certainly am not going to give my money to passable.
It's not a woke Nirvana.
No.
From what I've heard, it isn't as woke as some people try and make it out to be on the basis of that photograph.
No, but they treat him with a bit more respect. But I still, like, passable to me is not, like, going to be good. I'm not, you know, I'm don't mind James Bond, but I'm not a super fan, right? So I'm not going to go to the cinema and spend my money on it. Mr. Will Guitar says, has the panel seen British's latest favourite tune? It rivals the Magnum theme or opus. What have you been getting up to, British?
Just don't. He sent me a tweet, and
is it Hawaii 5-0?
I suspect the person is German. I just get that feel. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I just get this feel. This is some sort of Dadaist who is singing a pop song in. Mr. Will Guitar will know that like this, in an operatic manner. And yes, it's one of those where you want to drink bleach.
Pour it into your eyes, ears, and mouth. Is it?
Yes, very much so.
Good grief! So I haven't seen
whereas, yes, compared to that, I'm sorry, but the Magnum theme is it's Beethoven compared to that. Yes.
Finally, we have Marin Gatu, who says Caligula's horse senator is a myth. I don't know about it, because he's supposedly appointed the horse.
It's one of those things that is an allegedly, and it's we don't know it to be a myth in the same way that we don't know it to be fact. The reason why it has some credence is because Caligula went quite mad. And therefore you wouldn't really put it past him. I mean, we are talking of an absolute terror. Both with Caligula and with Nero, you are talking of a complete lunatic being on the throne. And how shall we say, nothing is quite as terrifying as an evil which is completely unpredictable. So if it's predictable, you at least know what to do and what not to do. Whereas if it's utterly unpredictable, it can hit you at any moment. And that was Caligula. So I don't think we can write off the horse as quite a myth. And this is the guy who is reported to have had his legions collect seashells by the seashore in order to bring them back and display them in triumph. As a sign of his having vanquished the sea. So, and imagine the situation. I mean, the Romans were quite bawdy. They were quite, they liked their graffiti. They liked gossip. Imagine what a society like that has to be like for nobody to say anything. Just how terrified everybody must be. And, his uncle Tiberius, the previous emperor, he already had a sort of enormous spy network all across Rome, where, a bit like in communist East Germany, where it's something like a quarter of the population that were informants to the Stasi.
Yeah.
It's when you live in a society like that, where the whole society is a sort of denunciation society. You never know when you're talking to an informant or one of them is standing next to you.
Yes.
When you live in a society like that, and then atop it all is a complete madman. Yeah, you kind of get a sense of it, that it could be a senator who's next, or it could be a washerwoman. Nobody has any idea, at what he is going to take umbrage next. And, in that regard, did he make his horse a senator? Who knows? I mean, another story of his is that he built a pontoon bridge over the Bay of Naples, or at least across part of it, because his uncle Tiberius, he wasn't the first heir. There were several heirs before him, and they all died. And
The
at
heirs
one
were
point,
trimmed,
when Tiberius was looking for another heir, Caligula is supposed to have suggested, well, why not me? And Tiberius's response is supposed to have been, you will sooner cross the Bay of Naples in a chariot than become Roman Emperor.
And so he did.
One of the first things he did when he became Roman Emperor was to have a bridge built so that he could cross it in a chariot to prove, to basically prove his uncle right that he had crossed the bay in a chariot and become emperor.
Amazing. I mean, the man was mad and a complete despot, but amazing. On that note, and thanks for that, Patricia, it is time to end. Unfortunately, my throat is giving out. Still not totally better, or so it seems. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed tonight's show. I hope you have as well. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and thank you, as always, to Britisher for suffering along with me.
Well, you say you're saying that your throat is giving in, but in reality, you've just lost patience, and you need as quickly as possible to get onto Amazon to order a copy of Spartacus. I know what you're doing.
Oh, it's on a streaming site loading up right now, of course. Why wouldn't it be? No, it wouldn't be that. Take care, take care, everybody, and have a great week. We will see you next Monday for the next instalment of Fake Accents Unite. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.